So in the end, that means mass conscription is going to be needed to stand up to the conventional forces of Russia and China. Sorry, but that's the long and the short of it. Otherwise, we won't stand a chance against them.
Well, that's assuming that we want to be getting into that kind of conflict in the first place.
Yeah, I was just going to say that rising hierarchy you've described, spot on, Alex. And where are the troops going to come from? Well, they're going to come from any nation that's gullible enough to get sucked into this globalist plan. So what we're hearing about from UK, that's the angle we're discussing today, is that we're going to take control of other nations and their human assets in order to form the armies we need.
I think that is absolutely right. And that was a key part of this integrated operating concept. Britain was presenting itself as the glue that binds together the integration. So they're providing all the back office roles. And they may have some specialist roles, for example, this future commando force. But really, we are providing the doctrine and the ideology that goes with this. We're providing the comms networks. We're providing the satellite communications and this kind of stuff. And but when you listen to it and when you read what they're saying, I mean, just remind everybody, one of the concepts that they are absolutely promoting, that Mark Cotton-Smith and Nick Carter are promoting, is this concept that war is no longer a binary position. You're not either at war or at peace. It's a spectrum that you're on. And so, in other words, they are very much hoping for the idea that we are in a persistent war, a perpetual war. Alex?
Well, look, there was a brief period of Pax Romana, and after that, Rome overextended itself because it thought it had taken on the burden of civilizing the world. So it always needed its auxiliaries and its Senate-controlled provinces in order to push its boundary back. There was also an economic bubble imperative there, that if they stopped moving, they would collapse under their own weight of bureaucracy by that time. So all of this vicious circle, we're now on that pathway. We're about the 3rd century in Roman Empire terms, and it's very closely mappable onto what we were talking about with the BBC as an overseas arm now of the Anglo-American world domination project, or the deep state project, because they are getting together the auxiliaries. We'll go into this in more detail in extra time for subscribers in several case studies from Eastern Europe. These auxiliaries are necessary to do the legwork so that our really suave operators can do the really hard work, pitting themselves directly against the Russians.
Yes. Now, they mentioned the Future Commando Force working with MI6, but what's MI6 up to?
Well, this is a good website, Daily Maverick in South Africa, and they are staying on the case of Alan Duncan's memoirs. He was the junior minister in British parlance, the Secretary of State. Sorry, I beg your pardon, the junior minister rather than Secretary of State at the Foreign Office. And he produced some rather, if you'll pardon the expression, bitchy memoirs. They were catty, shall we say, in which he blabbed on several things, one of which was that the Sultan of Oman, one of Britain's key protectorates in the Gulf, had a privy council which was stuffed with MI6 types. They've gone further into that, and they've now said that there's an entire secret Whitehall committee at the Ministry of Defence that holds no records. Gulf Advisory Group, according to the key points they've put below the headline. And it took some of the, I have to say, my least favourite, but I'll give them their due, my least favourite social justice warrior, Labour party representatives, alias members of parliament, did some digging here. And they were at first fobbed off. And also the ex-SNP man, Kenny MacAskill, he of the Lockerbie fiasco, who's now in Alex Salmond's new party, Alba, in Scotland. Kenny MacAskill, and I think it's one of the Coventry MPs, Sultana, who's quite a social justice warrior, they kept at the case, initially being told the group you're asking about doesn't exist, and found that there was actually a Gulf Advisory Group at the Ministry of Defence. It keeps no records. This cuts across, of course, all ECHR-type proprietary transparency of government and everything else that Britain shouts from the rooftops. But it's not even really MOD, it's MI6. It allows itself to be posted out to the Gulf and tell them what to do.
Okay, and we've got a quote from this. The meeting has only come to light 5 years later because of the Alan Duncan memoirs. So, okay, we'll keep an eye on that and see how that story develops. But now another story that's developing that we mentioned on Monday, of course, is the NSO group, the Israeli security group that has produced software which apparently is installable by governments on mobile phones, and makes those phones effectively open to various agencies. So NSO Group's customers, 51% of them are intelligence agencies, 38% law enforcement agencies, 11% military, and 60 customers in 40 countries is how they describe themselves. But it's okay. They turn away customers if they aren't ethical. Now, some people are asking, well, how does this work? Because I'm using encrypted channels in order to communicate with people. Well, of course, if you consider an encrypted channel, if you're looking at WhatsApp or you're looking at Telegram or so on, that only works. It's the connection between the two devices which is encrypted, so the encryption works across the network. And even assuming that encryption can't be broken, and I don't have any evidence that it can, and even assuming there aren't any backdoors in that encryption, and again, there's no evidence that there are, although MPs are calling for it. The key issue is, can the intelligence services or governments or the military or the police get control of one of the endpoints? Because the only benefit to encryption, even with end-to-end encryption, is on the network itself. On the phone, of course, the content is unencrypted, otherwise you couldn't write it and you couldn't read it. So if the agencies can get access to the phone and they can install their software on there, then of course you are hemorrhaging perhaps data from your microphone. It could be used as a bug. It could be used to log text messages as they're being typed in to WhatsApp and Telegram, or as they're being received. So end-to-end encryption is only useful up to a point. But as we have a look at this, we've got a statement from the United States here, from the White House, saying the United States, joined by allies and partners, attributes malicious cyber activity to irresponsible state behavior to the People's Republic of China. So this comes back to what we were talking about a second ago. But the question here, Alex, I've got to say, is what position are we in to be criticizing China or anybody else under these circumstances when we are employing an Israeli company to hack people's phones on the behalf of our governments? I'm not aware that there's any direct evidence being made public yet that China's doing this, but we now have more evidence. We've had plenty of evidence in the past, but more evidence that the British government, Western governments are doing exactly that.
Well, it's all Five Eyes countries. And I remember speaking in 2018 at Totnes about this at some length, about Israel as the sixth eye, or the eye that sits above the five and sucks up this data through contractors, but through controlling the deals that the governments of these countries sign with commercial actors. It really is able at the level of Unit 8200, the Israeli Signals Intelligence Agency, to hoover up whatever it wants. So we're in no position whatsoever. I mean, one of the other Five Eyes countries, Australia, hosts a company called Appen, APPEN. And it took a Dutch journalist, Mark van Mierop, to write a whole book recently called, Huub Modderkolk, I think his name is. Het is oorlog, maar niemand die het ziet. It is a war, but no one can see it. And he goes into detail on, he's not the only one, I've seen it personally too. Appen approaches linguists with a profile on various translation and transcription websites and says, do you want to transcribe material for us? It turns out to be chatter picked up from people's phone microphones, sort of third world immigrant taxi drivers in the West who speak rare and interesting dialects of interest to the military in the West. So we have absolutely no leg to stand on. From the tactical to the strategic, we do it all.
Yes, now just briefly, The Guardian is leading this really with a bunch of other organizations. This exposure, it's a result of a whistleblower, but 50,000 people are the number of people that are supposed to have this spyware on their phones so far. Not just journalists and activists, but also some world leaders, apparently. So we've got the South African president, we've got Emmanuel Macron listed, Tedros, or the World Health Organization's Director General, is on there. We've got Charles Michel, the president of the European Council, a couple of senior Moroccan politicians, Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and so the list goes on. So it's not just activists and journalists, although it's mainly activists and journalists, Alex. But I mean, what is going on when heads of state are being targeted?
That's Israel. I'll wager that. That's not okay. China wants to get into the big league of SIGINT players, which it hasn't previously been in, the big five. So obviously they would like, in a nice to have world of all their target wish lists, to have those heads of state and WHO types. But the emphasis on the activists and the emphasis on those particular countries of interest like Morocco and Pakistan make it pretty clear to me that's Israel.
Yes, and Alex, just briefly, because of course we've got to remember where this began. It was really with John Poindexter and DARPA and the Information Awareness Office, I think at the turn of the century or 2001. This logo didn't stick around too long because it became a little bit hot to handle, controversial and so on. But of course, what was being planned and being developed under the auspices of the Information Awareness Office was what eventually Edward Snowden blew the whistle on. It's what Bill Binney's blowing the whistle on. What we're seeing is a succession of these types of programs, but it really sort of began here, didn't it?
Well, yeah, I was at the conference. I didn't quite get the T-shirt, but I was at the inaugural NSA conference for Five Eyes analysts on intelligence analysis. I think it's an annual event now. I went in 2004, and I remember Mike Hayden, the then director, General Hayden, sorry, of the NSA, and Admiral Poindexter and the GCHQ contingent, including yours truly, asked a few questions. And I remember Poindexter colouring up like a beetroot being asked about that. Not that logo, but the TIA, the Total Information Awareness Package. They couldn't defend it even to a room of their own patsies. So embarrassed were they. Psychologically, I'd say the only rationale is that below all the levels of filthy Anglo-American deep state, Israel is there, and they knew that they were treasonous.
Yes.
Perhaps we should just add a little bit into that. So interesting now that DARPA's got into the medicine, health and genomics industry. But a lot more to come out on that little link.
Yes, but well, we're right out of time. But Alex, we do have an ending slide here. So tell us about this one.
Yes, this has been tweeted out by Gavin Ashenden, a well-known dissident cleric, formerly one of the Queen's chaplains until he got the boot. But it's originally featured in the Times. So for those who are listening without a picture, it's a Church of England parish church with two altar servers attending to the candles and straightening out the altar cloth. But in front of the altar cloth has gone a little flag, obscuring whatever Christian logo is there, underneath a crown of flowers, and it says, "National Health Service, we thank you." That is making the National Health Service an object of worship, isn't it? I think there's no two ways about that.
No, I think that's pretty clear.
Yes, but we've exposed in this news what's really happening to the NHS behind the scenes, which is that it's dissolving incredibly quickly as we're looking to this future policy on what healthcare is in partnership with the French.
Well, we had quite a bit of material that we didn't get through, so we'll cover some of that on Extra Time in a few minutes on the UK Column live stream. But otherwise, we'll be back on Friday at 1 p.m. as usual, unless there's something else you particularly wanted to do.
I was only going to say that there was a couple of people asking about Vanessa while we were doing the news. Vanessa is well, but conducting her own business at the moment, and hopefully we'll be able to hear more from her shortly. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Oops.